Divas, oh my gosh, welcome back to a deeper dive. This week's special guest, she is one of my OGs, Eve Samples, who is now, has been for a minute, the executive director of Friends of the Everglades. Why do we have her on the show? I don't know. If you have been not living under a rock, you'll know that she is at the forefront of the biggest news story in Florida right now, a lawsuit over an immigrant detention center in the Everglades. Eve's picked up the mantle from Marjory Stoneman Douglas, who started Friends of the Everglades. Eve will tell us all about the history of the organization, the work they're doing, and so much more. Please join us, Eve Samples, Executive Director, Friends of the Everglades.
We've made a lot of mistakes in Florida history, and we have repaired a lot of them, not all of them. And this is a case where it is not too late to turn around.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara Cam, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Oh, divas, we've got a very special guest with us today. I would say she's one of my OGs. I'm going to let her weigh in on whether she is or not. Eve Samples is the executive director of Friends of the Everglades. She is kind of front and center in the biggest news story in Florida, and not just in Florida right now. Welcome to the show, Eve.
Thank you, Dara. Pleasure to be here.
And to explain why you're an OG, maybe you can tell our divas who you are, what you do, and how you got there.
Sure. So I'm a Miami native, born and raised, and I went into the field of daily newspapers after college, worked in daily newspapers for 20 years. Started for a couple years in Pittsburgh, where people could pronounce my Polish maiden name, Modulewski, and then came back to Florida when I was in my early 20s and worked in daily newspapers, including at the Palm Beach Post, where you also worked, Dara.
That's right.
At a time when there was fierce daily competition among newsrooms. And the last 10 years of my career in journalism, I worked as an opinion writer, columnist at the Stewart News and Treasure Coast newspapers. And I spent a lot of time writing about environmental issues in that role. And it really captured my heart. And the opportunity emerged in early 2020 to move to the front lines of that advocacy, and really incredibly honored to be at Friends of the Everglades, which was founded by Marjory Stoneman Douglas, who also was a journalist. So
yeah,
it feels like there's some symmetry there.
Yeah, so passion project for you. I can't believe you've been there since 2020, because I just think of it as like yesterday that you left journalism. And Eve was a stellar writer for the Palm Beach Post, which was really a writer's paper at that time when you worked there. And dare I say, when I worked there, I only worked in the Capitol Bureau. I never worked at the mothership down there. Former postie, that's what we call ourselves, former posties. And I did work there for 10 years, and you were always a standout reporter, and you wrote a lot about environmental issues even back then. And now you're doing, you're as the head of the Friends of the Everglades, like I said, passion project, following what you really have devoted a lot of your time to. Obviously, you're at the forefront of this biggest news story in Florida right now, the lawsuit over an immigration detention in the Everglades. And it's a very layered situation. Things are changing daily. I know lately with my divas, I've been having to tell them, whatever we're saying now, we're recording this on, let's see, what day is today? Is Wednesday. So we're recording this on Wednesday. It'll come out on Sunday. So what, things change in this environment. Let's start with the location. I think a lot of the daily news coverage has left out, maybe not left out, but it gets lost in the mix. You mentioned Marjory Stoneman Douglas. This location was integral in the establishment of Friends of the Everglades, and actually in the law that this lawsuit is kind of hinges on. So can you tell us a little bit about the history?
Sure. So Friends of the Everglades was founded by Marjory Stoneman Douglas in 1969. By the way, she was 79 years old when she founded Friends. She lived to be 108. Rumor
Wow.
has it she had a couple cocktails a day. So just relaying that information for what it's worth. She also was instrumental in creation of Everglades National Park, which was formed in 1947, dedicated in 1947. And she wrote the book Everglades River of Grass that published in 1947. So she had this long, incredible career and life. And she wasn't really interested in creating a group until 1969, when a proposal to build what would have been the world's largest airport emerged for this very site that we're talking about in the detention center context emerged. So Marjorie was told, hey, you need a group to fight this. She founded Friends of the Everglades and got busy doing that. Around the same time, Everglades National Park created a science center. It still exists. It's one of the few science centers attached to national parks in the country. That science center produced a really important report about the environmental impacts of that airport. And the advocacy community and the science community and eventually the political community came around to stop that terrible idea. And in 1970, Richard Nixon, of all people, signed the accord to stop the jetport from being built. Now, it was halted after a single runway was built. And that's why we have this very lightly used airstrip out there. It was, prior to 2 weeks ago, used for training flights. And it really stood out as kind of a monument both to Florida's follies and to our environmental successes, right? I actually looked at the Google Earth image of that often before the last couple of weeks as a reminder of what we're fighting for. So here we are now. This is our origin story at Friends of the Everglades, and we're fighting to protect this very place from development. And I should just add that after that battle, when we stopped the airport from being built, the Everglades Jetport, Big Cypress National Preserve was created all around it, the country's first national preserve. So it is this airstrip encircled by Big Cypress National Preserve, which is an important part of the Everglades.
Oh, that's interesting. You know, it is the irony. I don't know if that's the word, the right word, the irony that the organization was born of this airstrip. I mean, it's not an airstrip now. I looked at the pictures. It's a little city kind of, it's really the development went up basically overnight is an exaggeration, but within a week, it is quite developed there. Marjory Stoneman Douglas, I mean, my goodness, I don't think there's anyone else who is more closely allied with the Everglades and protection of the Everglades than she is,
Yeah. I mean, with the exception of, the Miccosukee tribe and
right.
That existed before.
You're right. You're right.
In 1947, she wrote about the tribal presence there and connection to the land in a really human way, really stands out for that time in writing too. And she, bonded with the tribe, stood with the tribe. And now Betty Osceola, one of the Miccosukee tribal elders who's been at the forefront of this battle as well, is back at it too. And when she was a child, she was translating for her parents at some of the meetings about the original.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of
we need to try to get Betty Osceola on the show. I wonder if we can do that.
You asked about the law that we're suing under and how
yes
into the history. So we filed a lawsuit June 27th under the National Environmental Policy Act, and that is one of a series of environmental laws that came about in the early 1970s that created this framework, this fabric of environmental protections that changed things in the United States. This was around the time of the first Earth Day. So you had NEPA, as that law is known. You had the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act. EPA was formed. So this fabric was stitched together during what I think it was an environmental enlightening for the country. And now, fast forward, this moment we're living in now, all these threads are being tugged at on that fabric. And the question is whether the fabric can hold. It feels like an environmental unraveling right now. That's the term that keeps coming to my mind. And there's a lot of urgency around it.
An environmental unraveling. So it's kind of like we were in a gilded age almost for And I think about the governor, and I don't know how, you stopped me because I'm just going to, I'm a bull in a china shop. I'm just going to ask what I'm going to ask. But he sort of came out of the gate when he was elected 6 years ago. And, and protecting the Everglades, made a commitment to that and got a lot of accolades, I think, from environmental groups and campaigned on that. And now, I'm jumping ahead because we know the state used the emergency powers under this state of emergency that the governor declared because of immigration. I don't want to call it a crisis. That's what they have called it. And so we have been living under this executive order for 2 years in Florida. These emergency orders give the governor extraordinary powers. And so this airstrip and the property around it was the state seized it or took it as a result of through that authority given to the governor under the emergency power. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay.
It was just June 21st, 22nd, 23rd, that all was playing out. The state sent a notice of intent, a letter of intent to Miami-Dade County, which owns the property, even though it's in Collier County. Miami-Dade County owns this training.
It's confusing. Yeah,
it is. And then the mayor of Miami-Dade County, Daniela Levine Cava, responded saying, I don't think you're offering enough money and we need to analyze the environmental impacts. And then the same day she sent that letter back, the state responded again saying, we're giving you notice of intent to utilize the property, and didn't respond to any of the environmental concerns. So this all unfolded really rapidly. And yes, you're right. It was all under the cover of these executive orders that do give broad procurement powers to the state. I think we can debate the characterization of emergency, but we are very clear that the law requires an environmental impact analysis when there is a federal action, and the state and federal government are cooperating on this. So it's very clear, it's on the record.
And that's what the part of the lawsuit, the feds came in and said, look, the state's doing this. This property or this facility, the center is not, we didn't violate the law because no federal action was taken. And the state, your argument is you and the Center for Biodiversity, I should say also, and Earth Justice is representing you all. And who else? What's the other legal team that's?
Coffee Burlington is a law firm in Miami. It's Paul Schwepp and Scott Hyacin are attorneys. And Earth Justice is representing Friends of the Everglades. Center for Biological Diversity is representing itself. And
okay, I just want to make sure everybody gets a little shout out.
Yeah, thank you. They're doing incredible work.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work, and it's happening at very fast paced because you've filed the lawsuit and it's already I don't want to say it's too late, but whatever, there's already beginning to be some impact. So I wanted to move forward. I know you have other things to do, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that might get lost in, the esoterics about this law, the federal law. One of the things I was talking about, I'm supposed to be going out to Dog Island later this summer. A friend of mine has a house out there, and I was talking on the podcast last week about the night sky there. And one of the things I read in your complaint is the light pollution. But let's talk about some of the critters that this is home to. It's sort of amazing, the diversity of the habitat and the fauna out there too.
It is. Big Cypress is such an amazing place. So we know for sure that endangered species exist in this area and that habitat is being impacted. And I want to circle back to what you said about it being too late or not. It is not too late to stop this. In fact, every day that passes, there are additional impacts, additional detainees brought in. So the harm is ongoing and exacerbated, which is why we're not letting up on our request for an injunction to stop things. And that single runway out there reminds me, it's never too late, right? They could have said, oh,
Right.
They're already building it, it's too late.
Right.
But no, they stopped, and that runway was already built. So to your question about wildlife and the ecosystem, Florida panthers, one of the state's iconic endangered species, the hockey team's named for them that just won the Stanley Cup, right?
Right.
They are known to frequent this area. Some of them wear radio collars, and we know from telemetry data that they have been tracked on this very property, including on the runway where now you have facilities set up. So there are a lot of concerns about impacts to the Florida panther that have not been analyzed because, again, no environmental impact analysis has been done in this hasty execution.
And I think I saw in there that the number one, that there's like maybe around 200 or less than 200 panthers still existing, and that the number one mortality cause is they get hit by cars or vehicles. So that's a concern.
Yes. And I mean, as you can imagine, traffic on Tamiami Trail has increased dramatically, and the access road to the Jetport site also has just endless traffic now, big trucks.
Right.
Light pollution is a factor for species, including the panther. And also there's an endangered bat, the Florida bonneted bat, that is affected by light pollution. So now, where you used to have some of the most incredible dark skies, not just in Florida, but in the whole southeastern United States, they were designated and recognized for being some of the best dark skies. Now you have what looks like a stadium in the distance. You can see the lights from about 15 miles away.
Wow.
Documented this light pollution in photos in our court filings in recent days. So that's not just disruptive to the humans who like to look at the night sky. That's really disruptive to nocturnal species, and a lot of concerns about light pollution. Wetlands impacts are another big concern. More than 96% of this property is wetlands. That's documented in a fairly recent appraisal from Miami-Dade County. So the Everglades is one vast interconnected system of wetlands. So when you have an impact in one area, if you're adding pavement, if you're filling, and dozens of dump trucks with fill have moved into the site in recent weeks, you're impacting runoff, and that can impact wetlands. Again, no environmental analysis done. If you disturb wetlands, you have to get a federal permit for that, and that has not occurred. A lot of other concerns, noise pollution is a factor. Where we've had to assess all of these, cobble together aerial footage, on the ground footage, reports, and a lot of it is indisputable. But really, the government should have done this under the National Environmental Policy Act. That act is a very common sense law that makes the government look before it leaps when it does something, and it did not look, it just leapt this time.
And we'll be right back with Eve Samples, Executive Director of Friends of the Everglades. So remember when I said I was going on vacation? Oh, my plans fell through. Wah wah. Deeper Dive is going to take a vacation hiatus later this summer, but right now we're still coming at you with the content that you love. So anyway, here we are. Divas, you know what time it is. It's that time. The news in haikus. The news in haikus. This week, we have delivering the haikus written by my colleague, Tom Urban, who's sitting here in the speakeasy with me right now. Tom Urban, assignment manager for the News Service of Florida. Get ready for the news in haikus.
The river of grass, Alligator Alcatraz, like oil and water.
The news in haikus. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs, or you can send them to podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back with Eve Samples. Have you been out there?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, because I read one of your declarations, and you're going back out. So have you been able to see any changes, or what have you seen? Tell us, because I'm not down. I'm in Tallahassee. I know there's, lots of good reporting coming out of that site. Tell me what you've seen when you've gone out there, or what you're hearing from reports of other people.
So I haven't been on the site and, allowed into the site since it opened. And I'm sure you saw state lawmakers were turned away as well. Let me share first a little bit about being in Big Cypress before this happened.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. I love do that.
I, went Actually, it's my favorite Everglades experience. I went on a swamp walk very close to this area in Big Cypress National Preserve, behind Clyde Butcher's gallery there. You
Oh,
can do
wow.
a
Yeah.
guided swamp walk, and Clyde Butcher, the black and white photographer known for his Everglades images.
Yeah. Really big,
Yeah, gorgeous.
very gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. He's in his 80s and he's been engaged in this fight because he feels so strongly. But anyhow, some years ago, I did a swamp walk behind his gallery, and I'm not very tall, so water came up to about my waist, and it was incredible to be immersed under the cypress dome. The water's clear. You're walking on limestone bottom, the
Mm.
serenity of that moment. Yes, there are alligators nearby.
Hmm.
Yes, there are other snakes and critters nearby, but I felt nothing but peace in that moment. And there's some real irony in like these men with big titles talking about how scary the alligators are and the snakes, and they'll keep everybody away, when many people actually enjoy this ecosystem, and maybe they should give it a shot. So that's what it was like. Now, if you go out to the site, you're going to see a lot of traffic, a lot of noise, puffs of pollution coming out of big trucks, protesters at the entrance a lot of days. And at night, you will see the big lights in the distance. And a lot of these vehicles going in have their DOT numbers covered up. They
I
don't want to be
saw that.
identified. Yeah. And we had images early on of Department of Homeland Security vehicles moving in, photographs of that. Lately, they've been big white unmarked buses going in. So that's interesting to observe. The increasing activity. And this is a 2-lane road, Tamiami Trail, the road leading there. It's about an hour east of Naples and almost 2 hours west of Miami. It's not designed for this kind of bustling activity. It's really the middle of nowhere.
I've been thinking about that. At the one hand, the governor, the president, for goodness sake, the secretary of the Homeland Security, the attorney general, state attorney general, they came down. The Republicans and some elected officials have created this merch. We haven't called it what they're calling it. They have actually officially dubbed it Alligator Alcatraz. And there's this logo with a gator with its mouth open. They're selling merch with that logo on it. And yet at the same time, it feels like a lot of this is being done with very little public oversight, if any. I've been, and other reporters have been, requesting information about the contracts, about the vendors, about the plans. So far, as of today, haven't received anything. I imagine that's going to be something that you would be requesting as part of the discovery in the lawsuit. But it seems like they're doing, at the one hand, they're wanting to get a lot of attention, and, they're congratulating themselves on this or celebrating this as a new way of managing undocumented immigrants. And at the same time, it's being done on the down low in a lot of ways. Am I missing something?
Here's how I've come to think about this. So when the Attorney General of Florida rolled out this idea with a slick video on a cable news network without any heads up to the environmental community or any public input, initially I thought this is a stunt to distract us from other things. This isn't really going to happen. But I came to the conclusion in pretty short order that it was a stunt and they were serious. And I feel like that's the era we're living in. Don't dismiss stunts because they are real and there's a very good chance they will happen. So yeah, it's a real low watermark. You asked about DeSantis earlier, and he campaigned during a toxic algae water crisis.
That's right.
In 2018. He took office until early 2019 and rolled out an executive order on the environment that had some good provisions in it. And a lot of the follow through was lacking. And as the years have gone on now, and we're in his second term, we've really seen an about face on a lot of environmental postures. Last summer, it was the state park sneak attack.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. I love when my guests get to the questions before I do, because we call that organic, I think, or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all related. This is even though the detention center in the Everglades has sucked the air out of the room, it's not isolated. We had the attack on state parks. 9 state parks were proposed for very harmful development. A whistleblower at DEP leaked the plans. Thousands and thousands of people across Florida were outraged and spoke out. DeSantis backed off. And then we got a state law passed this year that was even better and more protective of state parks. So that had a happy ending. And then after that, we became deeply engaged in an 8,000-acre rock mine that's proposed south of Lake Okeechobee on sugarcane fields. This unsolicited public-private partnership that is not beneficial to the Everglades. So we were fighting that when this came along.
Okay.
And the DeSantis administration, its DEP, has issued the permits for that rock mine. So again, it's a pattern of behavior, and you can't claim to be the Everglades governor when these things are happening under your watch.
And you guys have focused on the environmental impact, but I do think that, and I think the governor said, like, these are just people who don't want us to be going after illegal immigrants. That's not my languaging. I'm not sure if that's the words that he used or not, but we do need to not forget that we are talking about a tremendous impact on human beings too, who will be brought there. It's a very remote facility. I guess it's air conditioned, but we do get hurricanes in the summer. We don't know how long it's going to be there or how long the folks will be staying there before they're being ostensibly put on airplanes and sent to someplace. We just don't know. There's a lot of unknowns. And I don't know if you all have a opinion or a take on the use of this facility, the purpose of it, or is that something that you're kind of just leaving to others?
I think we have to acknowledge the cruelty of housing detainees in these conditions in the middle of summer. We saw video footage that the facility was leaking the first day. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered about what's happening there, how people are being treated. Other groups are playing that role. Our mission at Friends of the Everglades is to preserve, protect, and restore the only Everglades in the world. And that's how we spend our donor dollars. And that's why we filed the lawsuit. Now, I did see that Mayor Daniela Levine Cava of Miami-Dade County sent a letter just yesterday asking for oversight and access to the site and pointing to deaths in other ICE detention facilities in Florida. So I think it's a really important question. The humanity of all of this cannot be dismissed. Those of us who are working in the environmental lane have that lane to work in our day jobs, but we're human beings, right? We think about other things as human beings too. So nothing's in a vacuum.
Yeah. And I guess then let's talk about what you're asking the court. You're saying that this environmental impact, you're not just saying it, this environmental impact study was not done. That's right. And
100%
that's
true.
Yeah. I don't think there's any question about that. What would happen? You're asking, so you can't ask for this to be blocked from being built because I guess there's already, what I saw, one of the filings from today or yesterday, I guess, said that there's 11 more acres of asphalt. Before we get to that, let me ask you this, actually, interrupt myself. What do you say to the argument that there's, gazillions of acres of wetlands in the Everglades and that this little bitty piece of whatever they're doing, it's a filtration system that cleans itself, and that this impact is going to be so minuscule that it's really not going to matter? What do you say to that?
That sounds like the observations of people who either don't care or haven't studied the impact or both. And I think that's probably the case, the folks driving this. Yes, the Everglades are vast, but we've lost more than half of the historic footprint of the Everglades to development and drainage. And on top of that, these federal laws exist for a reason. When there is government action, federal action, you have to analyze what the impacts will be and also whether there are alternatives.
Right.
Evaluating alternative sites is required, and they totally bypass that. So the vastness of the Everglades is not a defense at all. In fact, I think the vastness of the Everglades speaks to the need to protect what we have left.
Right. Okay. Well, then I appreciate that. I just wanted to give you a chance to answer that question. What I was saying is there's 11 more acres of asphalt, I think, that have gone down.
Right.
And there's housing for workers, not just for the detainees, which I think it can hold up to 2,000, 3,000,
They're saying 3 now.
3,000.
Mhm.
So I don't know, like 1,000 employees or more, maybe. You can't stop that from existing now. What can happen? What is the outcome that you're looking for in addition to the study, obviously?
Sure. So let's do the environmental impact analysis. Let's look at alternatives. First of all, halt activity out there ASAP, and that's what we're waiting for the court to respond to. I'll go back to an old quote from the late great editor of the Stuart News, where I spent some of my journalism years, and he said, "What men do, they can undo." And that was in the context of environmental degradation in the St. Lucie River in that case. But we've made a lot of mistakes in Florida history, and we have repaired a lot of them, not all of them. And this is a case where it is not too late to turn around. Yes, some asphalt has been laid. We've seen that. Paving has occurred, but we need to stop the damage. It lends urgency to what we're asking for.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to add? Also, how do people who maybe want to help out Friends of the Everglades, what do they do?
Thanks for asking that. You can go to everglades.org and you can check out our information and updates on our lawsuit, on our advocacy. You can send a message to the governor and attorney general easily from our website. More than 35,000 people have done that through our website. So yeah, stay tuned, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. We're doing a lot of communication on this. It's really grabbed the attention of Floridians and the country and even the world. I'm meeting a German TV station to do an interview at the site tomorrow. So
Oh, wow. Well, we're really lucky that you joined us here, and I know you're busy. So let me just ask one question. You're new to the show. We'll have you back on again. Thank you for joining. This is a little classic question. Okay, Crocs, yay or nay?
Nay.
Well, you got to be a beach girl. So what do you wear for the beach if you don't do Crocs?
Tevas.
Tevas, okay, because she's really that kind of a beach girl. That's Eve Samples, the executive director of Friends of the Everglades. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Thanks, Dara. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.